Sean and I are doing disability services as our topic area. I just wanted to give a brief overview of our presentation before we start. Much of disability services is understanding the difference between disability and ability. And so we start off our presentation with a bit of education. We're then going to do an activity. We're also going to discuss some critical issues in the area, and then kind of look at the overview of what the job looks like, okay? Sound good? All right. So we start off with our presentation with a quote from Stephen Anderson, who is the Director of Disability Resources at Hamlin. And he said to me during our interview, the biggest disability you have, and it wasn't targeted specifically, but more broadly, the biggest disability you have is your perception of meaning. And Stephen has cerebral palsy, right? He can move, he is quite crippled in movement, and he also has trouble with speech. So that was a powerful quote to me, and it was something that really resonated me from my interview with him. And so as we move through our presentation, like, think about that. And when you're working with students and peers, or family members and friends, think about that, okay?
So there are four main categories within disability services: mental, physical, sensory, and behavioral. Mental is more of the mental issues, mental disabilities, ranging from anywhere from possibly schizophrenia to Down syndrome and a wide variety in between. Physical is, like she said, cerebral palsy. More of an obvious, they can't get around, they can't see, things like that, which can be very obvious at the same time. Sensory, they can't see, they can't process something, things along those lines. And then behavioral is just their overall ability to function with outside in a social interaction or in similar situations.
And I really like this graphic, however simple it may be, because I feel like most often the only thing we ever see is this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that this clip art is life-changing or going to turn your world upside down, but it does include sensory, physical, and mental as well.
Yep.
So there are other things that also go along with this. You might hear cognitive or emotional disabilities. There are many, many, many categories. We just tried to whittle it down to four.
Yeah,
for sake of discussion.
And one disability can span multiple areas,
right,
too. So remember that too.
A key point for disability is that it knows no age or length, right? I think this is something that people sometimes they forget about, or they're not conscious that it may start and it may end. It might be with you for life. We put a few examples up here, ranging from an infant to an older person. Again, like, do you think about people losing their hearing or having glaucoma in older age as a disability, or just being an old person, right? Like, how you think about that and how you process that really matters. Also, just keeping in mind that, like, in the area that we're in, like, a lot of mental issues specifically start around the ages of 18 to 24. So people or students might be coming to college with no disability, and halfway through college might find out, oh my, I'm having trouble with X, or this is new to me, and helping students kind of navigate that terrain is where we all can help. Does anyone have time to read these if they want to?
So here we're going to kind of give you a brief overview of two different mission statements. They're very similar in their overall goal, but some of the use of the terms that they use. Their main goal is ultimately to help provide support and equal access. So that's the main overall theme for any disability services, is to help provide that support and to provide that equal access. And quite often they do that through educating, for Capella especially, that's within their mission statement, is educating faculty, staff, and about disabilities, and also trying to stay within the guidelines that are provided by the ADA, the Section 504 and Section 508, which we'll be covering in a little bit.
And a cool point also to mention, you know, between, I like the contrast of these two, they were both my interviews, which were so fascinating. But Hamlin, of course, many students are on campus, right? There's not a whole lot of online learning going on at Hamlin, there's some. Capella is completely online. So if you look at like the difference in how people are accessing their education, and yet they still have very similar mission statements, I thought that was like a really cool just point, you know, to, you might be very different universities, public, private, community, online, but your mission statements in this, specifically in this area, line up very similar.
One other thing too is the idea of reasonable access. You'll see this coming up quite often in disability services, and it's a very general way they phrase things because no person is the same. So they have to find solutions to a multitude of different problems, but they use very similar guidelines, but they approach solutions in very unique ways depending on the individual.
Okay, activity time. We're gonna do 1 minute on each side. Stephen did this at a professional development meeting that we had as student affairs at St. Thomas. It's not St. Thomas. In Hamlin. Wait. 326. And so, okay, so this is idea creation, what we just did for APA. Yay.
So,
okay.
First, we want to kind of just start rattling off some of the myths that you think of immediately when you think of disabilities.
Right? I'll start you off.
Okay.
Everyone with a disability rides on the short bus. What other myths do you? Just shot them up.
Can't do it.
What?
They can't do it.
Can't do it.
Not capable. Yep,
Slow?
Right. Slow.
Slow?
We can see the disability.
Huh?
We can see the disability.
Yep.
Visible.
Yes.
Yes. Anything else?
Come on.
Physical relationships.
Physical relationships.
There you go.
If they're physically disabled, they have a mental disability too.
Any other? Come on. There's more.
I said if they're physically disabled, they have a mental disability too, so people treat them like they're dumb.
If they have mental disability, they're dangerous.
Right?
Oh, that's a good one. Yep.
People with mental disabilities can't have jobs.
Yeah.
Anything else?
They're not
It's an
happy.
excuse.
Not happy. Oh, it's an excuse. Yeah. Not happy.
If they overcome it, they're superheroes.
Yep. Okay, what about some truths?
Totally capable.
They lead normal lives.
It's just so good. What? Sorry, what?
Lead normal lives.
Normal lives.
They're capable of having relationships, like normal relationships.
Yes, normal relationships.
It's only one part of their identity.
Yes.
Yes.
Just because they can't communicate it doesn't mean they don't know or don't understand.
Great.
I'm
just gonna put smart. Anybody else?
They're not always visible.
Okay. Excellent.
Any other
Stephen
things?
was working the crowd while we did this, right? We were all just like, no. And he's like, what about the word retard? What about the word special? What about this? It was very powerful coming from him because I just feel like people were like, people were hesitant to discuss it with a person that actually did have a disability, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Thank you for participating. Okay, so one of the critical issues in disabilities right now is apparent versus non-apparent disabilities, i.e. visible versus invisible disabilities. There's some discussion on the topic of invisible versus visible for semantic reasons and what it infers. I've been told apparent versus non-apparent is more correct. I don't know. So anyway, what I wanted to talk about with this, and I have a couple of fun clip art things here, but especially the one that it's all in your head, right? All of the people that we interviewed said that most of the people that they're dealing with as students have invisible disabilities more so than visible disabilities. So the caseload for those with mental issues or
Sorry.
no, that's okay.
The caseload for those, which we'll be going over caseload here in a few moments
Yep.
too, is growing, and it's becoming more difficult for them to handle and to deal with, and to be able to educate faculty on how to adapt their curriculum so that they can better reach those students.
Right. Self-disclosure.
Yeah, self-disclosure is another huge one that is developing within disability services. This is because many times, quite often, earlier they received negative feedback when they were vocal about their disability, or they feel uncomfortable expressing that they have this not visible processing issue, or they're just not, they have to do things a different way, which can be it can be a big struggle for somebody to come out and say, I have this. So for me, I can give you an example. In another class, I was discussing my disability with the professor, and then I wanted to use that for a class, for a research topic as well. We were going through kind of hashing out the topic, and he was trying to draw out why I wanted to cover this topic in class. And I felt very uncomfortable because I didn't necessarily know everybody that was in the space as intimately as in other areas. So it becomes very, very self-conscious, and it makes it difficult for them to identify and then try to get help for that.
Right. Also in high school, you usually have a caseworker or someone that works directly with you and helps you through that. In college, you have to self-identify, right? You need to go tell somebody about what's going on with you. Perception of need, I'll just go, this ties into apparent versus not apparent too, and I read some articles on autism spectrum disorder specifically about what's the need here, right? So some of the research that I read said, you know, a lot of students with autism or autism spectrum disorders like Asperger's may very well have a high, have a high IQ and do well in class. Their disability is social. So how do we help those that have social disabilities? You know, there was things noted in the article like, well, how do, we just need to help them make friends. Like what is, but in the school, in the class setting, what if the class is mostly group work, Like that's a huge deal. And so there'll be more to come on this, and I'm really excited to read more about it because I think that it's a front that needs more attention.
And finally, for the big critical issues that we're covering right now is caseload. There is a big explosion of the need for providing and helping within disability services, as there's a growing understanding of what is needed for these different disabilities, for lack of a better word. And so all these people are becoming identified in school in lower education levels, and then as they're coming into the higher education level, there's not the additional support that is needed. One thing that over at Osberg that is done that I didn't see, and I don't know if is done at many other institutions currently, is they provide a lot more one-on-one counseling with the individuals. So they meet once a week or once a month, and then they also have somebody in the back side doing the accommodation side, where typically, from what I've seen, they usually meet with them once a year just to kind of get an idea of what they're actually needing.
And like was mentioned in the past presentation, the explosion of mental health issues has just created that much more for Stephen, who's a one-man show at Hamlin, to do. This is in our handouts. I won't go over it extensively, but just what disability services professionals do. A lot of it is intake, understanding what the student needs, and then finding the connections for them. I think that's a simplified version of what disability services do. One thing I just wanted to get to, because it is a big part of disability services, and we'll go through this. Every job description that we read requires that you have a working knowledge of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, the ADAA, and Section 508, which is sometimes not as known as the other two. So if you have Section 504, right on. Rip it open and read.
Section 504 of Rehabilitation Act. Section 504 of the
Oh, we have
Rehabilitation
time,
Act
okay.
of 1973 is a national law that protects qualified individuals from discrimination based on their disability. The non-discrimination requirements of the law apply to employers and organizations that receive financial assistance from any federal department or agency, including the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Section 504 forbids organizations and employers from excluding or denying individuals with disabilities an equal opportunity to receive program benefits and services.
Do you want us to do the other two? I can summarize otherwise.
Yeah, let's do, I think it's valuable for all of us to hear it,
Okay.
so let's do it.
We have ADAAA. The ADA Amendments Act of 2008, the ADAAA, which I just now named it, was enacted on September 25th, 2008 and became effective on January 1st, 2009. The law made a number of significant changes to the definition of disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It also directed the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to amend its ADA regulations to reflect the changes made by the ADAAA. In enacting this, Congress made it easier for an individual seeking protection under the ADA to establish that he or she has a disability within the meaning of the statute.
And 508, which is kind of is happening right now, so.
Yeah.
In 1998, the U.S. Congress amended the Rehabilitation Act to require federal agencies to make their electronic and information technology accessible to people with disabilities. Section 508 was enacted to eliminate barriers in information technology, to make available new opportunities for people with disabilities, and to encourage development of technologies that will help achieve these goals. There was, however, nothing in Section 508 that requires private websites to comply unless they are receiving federal funds or under contract with a federal agency. In 2006, the United States Access Board organized the Telecommunications and Electronic Information Technology Advisory Committee to review and recommend updates to its Section 508 standards. In February 2015, the board released a notice of proposed rulemaking for the Section 508 standards.
Eleanor Source would say that's ongoing right now. It's not technology. Thank you, we're done.
We have 2 minutes and 30 seconds for questions.
Did you notice, or at the conference at MCDPA we were just at, one of the things I heard in the disability bill is that there's sometimes like the faculty are struggling